Commander Jake Sullivan stood on the observation deck of the colony's main building, watching the sunrise paint the wheat fields gold. Haven's Rest had been his home for 3 years now, and he never got tired of this view. The farming colony stretched out for miles in every direction, with neat rows of crops and small houses where 50,000 people lived quiet, peaceful lives. He checked his watch. Another normal day was starting. The Henderson family would be checking their corn harvest. Dr. Lisa Morgan would be opening the medical center. Teacher Amy Johnson would be getting ready for another day with the colony's children. Lieutenant Paul Davis would be doing his morning patrol with the small security team. Jake smiled. This was exactly what humanity had hoped for when they started, building colonies among the stars. Haven's Rest produced enough food to feed 12 different star systems. They sent grain ships out every month, and the credits they earned helped Earth build more colonies like this one. The communication panel on his desk beeped. Rachel Torres, their communications officer, appeared on the screen. She looked worried. "Commander, we're getting some strange readings on the long-range sensors," Rachel said. "Something big is heading our way." Jake walked over to his desk and sat down. "How big are we talking about?" "Multiple contacts. At least 30 ships, maybe more. They'll be here in 6 hours." Jake felt his stomach drop. Haven's Rest was on the edge of human space. They sometimes got visits from exploration, ships or trade vessels, but never this many at once, and those ships always announced themselves days in advance. "Are they responding to our identification requests?" Jake asked. Rachel shook her head. "Nothing. Complete radio silence." Jake stood up and walked to the window again. The peaceful morning suddenly felt different. Down in the fields, he could see Kevin Wright working on one of the farming machines, completely unaware that unknown ships were racing toward their world. "Get me Lieutenant Davis," Jake said, "and send a message to all department heads. I want everyone in the main conference room in 30 minutes. An hour later, Jake looked around the table at the worried faces of Haven's Rest's leadership. Dr. Lisa Morgan sat next to Mayor Helen Foster. Security Chief Dan Morris was reading reports on his tablet. Lieutenant Paul Davis had his small military team with him. "Here's what we know," Jake said. 30-plus unknown ships are heading straight for us. They're not talking to us, and they're not on any scheduled flight path. They'll be in our space in 5 hours. Mayor Foster leaned forward. "Could they be pirates?" Lieutenant Davis shook his head. "Pirates don't travel in fleets this size. This looks more like a military formation." "Military?" Dr. Morgan asked. "But we haven't had any contact with hostile alien species. The galaxy is supposed to be peaceful." Jake wished he could agree with her, but something felt very wrong about this situation. Haven's Rest had basic defensive systems, mostly mining equipment that could be turned into weapons if needed. They had 3 small patrol ships that were mainly used for checking on farming equipment in orbit. Against 30 unknown ships, they would be helpless. The communication panel buzzed. Rachel's face appeared on the screen and she looked scared. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission from the incoming fleet. You need to hear this." The screen changed, and Jake found himself looking at something he had never seen before. The alien had pale blue skin, large black eyes, and was wearing what looked like a military uniform. When it spoke, the translation system made its voice sound cold and mechanical. "Human colony, this is High Admiral Vextha of the Zephyrian Dominion. You have built your settlement in violation of ancient territorial boundaries. Your presence here is illegal and must be corrected immediately." Jake stood up. "This is Commander Sullivan of Haven's Rest Colony. We have legal settlement rights to this system, granted by the Galactic Council. There must be some mistake." The alien's large eyes showed no emotion. "There is no mistake. Your species is new to this galaxy and does not understand the old laws. This world sits on a sacred trade route that has belonged to the Zephyrian Dominion for 10,000 years. You will evacuate all personnel within 6 hours, or we will begin corrective cleansing operations." Corrective cleansing? Jake felt ice in his veins. What does that mean? "Your settlement will be removed. Your people will be relocated to appropriate worlds for your species. Resistance will result in casualties." The transmission ended, leaving the room in shocked silence. Security Chief Morris was the first to speak. Did that alien just threaten to attack us? Lieutenant Davis was already pulling up tactical displays. Commander, we have no way to evacuate. 50,000 people in 6 hours. Our transport ships can't carry more than a few hundred at a time. Jake looked around the room at the faces of people who had become his friends over the past 3 years. These were farmers, teachers, doctors, and engineers. They had come to Haven's Rest to build something good, something peaceful. They had families here, children who had been born on this world and had never seen any other home. Mayor Foster spoke quietly. What are our options? Lieutenant Davis pulled up the colony's defensive capabilities on the main screen. It wasn't encouraging. We have mining lasers that could be weaponized, some basic shield generators, and 3 patrol ships. Against a fleet of 30 warships, we might last 10 minutes. Dr. Morgan stood up. There has to be something we can do. We can't just let them destroy everything we've built here. Jake walked to the window and looked out at the colony again. In the distance, he could see the school where Amy Johnson taught. Children were playing in the yard during their break time. They were laughing and running around, completely innocent of the danger racing toward them. He turned back to the group. There is one option we haven't discussed. Rachel looked up from her communication station. The emergency beacon. Jake nodded. Earth gave every colony an emergency quantum beacon for situations exactly like this. We've never used it because we've never needed to. The emergency beacon was humanity's ultimate distress call. It would broadcast across every human settlement, every human ship, and every human military base in known space. It was only supposed to be used if a colony was facing complete destruction with no hope of survival. Lieutenant Davis understood immediately. Commander, activating that beacon means telling all of humanity that we're under attack, that we need immediate military assistance. I know what it means, Jake said quietly. Security Chief Morris looked confused. But our nearest military ships are weeks away, maybe months. Even if they got the message and came at full speed, they wouldn't get here in time to help us. Jake walked back to his desk and pulled out a secure communication device he had hoped he would never need to use. The emergency beacon was small, about the size of his hand, but it contained quantum transmitters that could reach across the galaxy, instantly. You're right, Jake said. Help won't get here in time to save us. But maybe our message will prevent this from happening to other colonies. He looked around the room one more time. These people trusted him to make the right decision. Outside, 50,000 colonists were going about their daily lives, unaware that alien warships would be in orbit within hours. Jake activated the beacon. Immediately, alarms began sounding throughout the colony as the quantum transmitters drew massive amounts of power from the main generators. His voice was steady as he spoke into the device. This is Commander Jake Sullivan of Haven's Rest Colony, Kepler 442c system. We are under attack by an alien force calling itself the Zephyrian Dominion. They are demanding we evacuate our world and threatening to use military force against civilian targets. We have 50,000 colonists, including families with children. We cannot evacuate in time, and we cannot defend against their fleet. Any human vessel receiving this message, please respond. We need immediate assistance. Jake released the transmit button and looked up at the others. The beacon would keep broadcasting his message every 10 minutes until it was shut off or destroyed. Lieutenant Davis was already coordinating with his security teams. Dr. Morgan was preparing the medical center for casualties. Mayor Foster was trying to figure out how to tell 50,000 people that their peaceful world was about to become a battleground. Outside the window, the children were still playing in the schoolyard. In 4 hours, alien warships would be in orbit above them. Jake had done the only thing he could do. He had called for help even though help was too far away. Now all they could do was wait and hope that somewhere in the vast darkness of space, someone was listening. Admiral Rick Carson was reviewing supply reports in his office aboard Titan Naval Station when the emergency alert screamed through every speaker in the facility. He had been in the human Navy for 28 years, and he had never heard that particular alarm before. Captain Lisa Brooks burst through his door without knocking. Her face was white with shock. Admiral, we're receiving an emergency beacon transmission from Haven's Rest colony. They're under attack. Rick dropped his tablet and stood up immediately. Attack? By who? Unknown alien force calling themselves the Zephyrian Dominion. They're threatening to destroy the colony if the civilians don't evacuate. Rick felt something cold settle in his stomach. In all the years humans had been exploring space, they had encountered dozens of alien species. Most were friendly. Some were neutral. None had ever attacked a human settlement. Get me a direct line to Fleet Command on Earth, Rick said, walking quickly toward the command center. And I want every ship commander in this system on emergency conference in 5 minutes. The command center was already buzzing with activity when Rick arrived. Tactical analyst Ben Rodriguez was pulling up star charts showing Haven's Rest location. Communications officers were trying to reach other human military installations across the galaxy. What's our response capability? Rick asked. Captain Brooks checked her displays. We have 12 ships currently docked at Titan Station. The Dreadnought, Vengeance, is completing repairs and could be ready in 2 hours. Carriers Retribution and Thunder are fully operational. Rick nodded. Get them ready to move. What about other installations? Ben Rodriguez looked up from his tactical display. Sir, the emergency beacon is being received by every human military base in known space. Wolf 359 defense platform is already mobilizing their fleet. Deep space patrol ships are changing course and heading for Haven's Rest. How many ships total? We're still getting reports, but it looks like over 200 vessels are responding. Rick stared at the number on the screen. 200 ships. The largest human fleet ever assembled was responding to the attack on Haven's Rest. The emergency beacon was doing exactly what it was designed to do. At Wolf 359 defense platform, Fleet Commander Greg Mitchell was having similar conversations with his staff. Lieutenant Commander Amy Walsh was coordinating with ship captains across the system. Captain Nathan Pierce reports the Vengeance can be underway in 90 minutes, Amy said. Captain Emma Davis says the Retribution is ready to launch immediately. Greg looked at the tactical display showing ship positions across human space. Red dots were moving from dozens of locations, all converging on Haven's Rest. Ships that had been on exploration missions, patrol duties, and even training exercises were abandoning their assignments and racing toward the colony. Commander, we're getting reports from ships that were in dry dock, Amy continued. Engineering crews are working around the clock to get them space ready. At the Proxima Naval Yards, Chief Petty Officer Tony Martinez was shouting orders to his repair teams. The cruiser Determination had been scheduled for 3 more days of maintenance, but Admiral Carson needed every available ship. I don't care if the paint is still wet, Tony yelled over the noise of welding torches and power tools. This ship needs to be ready to fight in 6 hours. Across the shipyard, similar scenes were playing out. Ships that should have been in maintenance for weeks were being rushed back into service. Engineers were working with tools in one hand and coffee in the other, knowing that 50,000 human lives might depend on their work. Dr. Sarah Williams, head of Human Naval Intelligence, was in her office on Earth trying to understand what the fleet was facing. She had pulled every file available on the Zephyrian Dominion, which wasn't much. They're a minor power, she told Admiral Carson via quantum communication link. Mostly traders and explorers. We've had limited contact with them, always peaceful. Then, why are they attacking Haven's Rest? Rick asked. Unknown. This doesn't match their previous behavior patterns. Something has changed. Rick looked at the growing fleet display on his screen. Ships were jumping into hyperspace from dozens of systems, all heading for the same destination. The human defense fleet had never mobilized like this before. Doctor, what are we looking at in terms of opposition? Sarah checked her reports. Best estimate is 30 to 40 ships. Standard Zephyrian military vessels are smaller than ours and less heavily armed. But Admiral, we don't know if they have allies. At the same time, aboard the deep space cruiser Explorer, Captain Alex Turner was explaining the situation to his crew. They had been on a scientific mission to map a new star system when the emergency beacon reached them. We're changing course immediately, Alex announced over the ship's communication system. A human colony is under attack, and we're the closest ship that can respond. His navigation officer, Lieutenant Roy Griffin, was already plotting a course to Haven's Rest. "Captain, at maximum speed we can be there in 18 hours. Then that's how fast we're going. Push the engines as hard as they'll take." Similar conversations were happening on ships across human space. On the transport vessel Liberty, Captain Derek Moore was explaining to his passengers why they were suddenly heading toward a potential battle zone instead of their scheduled destination. "Every ship in the human fleet has a duty to respond to emergency beacons," Derek told the worried civilians. "We can't leave 50,000 people to face this alone." At military academies and training facilities, instructors like Colonel Patricia Lee were watching the mobilization with mixture of pride and concern. This was exactly what the human defense fleet had been created for, but it was also the first test of whether their peacetime military could handle a real crisis. "Look at this response," Patricia told her students as they watched the fleet tracking displays. "Every ship, every crew, dropping everything to help people they've never met. This is what makes us human." Back on Titan Station, Admiral Carson was receiving constant updates on ship movements. Captain Linda Scott reported that the destroyer Squadron 7 was ready to depart. Captain Gary Phillips confirmed that the battleship Thunder had cleared all safety checks. "Admiral," Captain Brooks said, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth Fleet Command." The main screen showed Admiral Helen Wright, the highest-ranking officer in the human Navy. Her expression was grim. "Rick, I'm authorizing full fleet mobilization. Every available ship is to proceed to Haven's Rest immediately." "Understood, Admiral. What are our rules of engagement?" "These aliens have threatened to destroy a civilian colony with 50,000 people, including children. If they fire on human civilians, you have authorization to use whatever forces necessary to stop them." Rick nodded. "We'll be ready." As the transmission ended, Rick looked around the command center. His officers were working with focused intensity, preparing for humanity's first interstellar military action. None of them had ever been in a real battle, but they all understood what was at stake. "Captain Brooks, signal the fleet. All ships are to proceed to Haven's Rest at maximum speed. Formation orders will be transmitted during transit." "Yes, sir." "Admiral, the first ships should arrive at Haven's Rest in 16 hours. Rick looked at the tactical display one more time. 200 human ships, carrying thousands of sailors, marines, and officers, were racing through space toward a small farming colony most of them had never heard of. On Haven's Rest, Commander Sullivan and his people were facing impossible odds, with no hope of rescue arriving in time. But across human space, every available warship was proving that no human settlement would face danger alone. The aliens threatening Haven's Rest thought they were dealing with a small, isolated colony. They were about to discover they had declared war on all of humanity. Sergeant Major Chris Evans, aboard the assault ship Fury, was briefing his Marines on what they knew about the situation. "We don't know much about these Zephyrians," Chris told his troops. "But we know they're threatening to kill human civilians. That's all we need to know." Marine Lieutenant Katie Johnson raised her hand. "Sergeant Major, what's the estimated arrival time?" 17 hours. The colonists are on their own until then." The Marines looked at each other with grim determination. 17 hours was too long. 50,000 people shouldn't have to face this threat alone. But the human fleet was coming, and when they arrived, the aliens would learn what happened to anyone who threatened human families. In the depths of space, the largest military fleet in human history raced toward Haven's Rest, carrying with them the absolute determination that no human colony would ever stand alone against aggression. That was when Vextha realized his fatal mistake. The humans weren't fighting by galactic standards because they weren't from the galaxy's peaceful core worlds. They were from Earth, a planet so dangerous that most species considered it uninhabitable. Their entire civilization had evolved to survive in conditions that would kill most galactic citizens. He had just declared war on a spee. The battle for Haven's Rest became the most one-sided military engagement in galactic history. What High Admiral Vextha expected to be a quick victory over primitive humans turned into a nightmare that would be studied in military academies for generations. Captain Emma Davis launched her fighter squadrons from the carrier Retribution with deadly precision. Commander Jake Harrison led the first wave of human fighters toward the Zephyrian fleet. His pilots had trained in Earth's atmosphere, where violent storms and crushing gravity made flying a constant battle for survival. "Lightning Squadron, form up on me," Jake commanded over the radio. "Remember, these aliens just tried to bomb a school full of children." Lieutenant Susan Kelly, flying beside Jake, locked onto her first target. The Zephyrian fighter she was chasing had been designed for the gentle atmospheric conditions of core galaxy worlds. It moved slowly and clumsily compared to human fighters built to handle Earth's dangerous weather patterns. "Target acquired," Susan reported. "These things fly like cargo haulers." The Zephyrian pilot tried to escape using standard evasive maneuvers, but human pilots had learned to fly in conditions where a single mistake meant death. Susan's fighter stayed locked on target through turns that would have torn apart most galactic aircraft. Her weapons fired, and the alien fighter disappeared in a ball of flame. Across the battle space, similar scenes played out as human fighters completely dominated their Zephyrian opponents. The aliens had never faced pilots who treated atmospheric flight as a daily survival challenge. Meanwhile, the capital ship battle was revealing an even greater difference in military capability. Captain Nathan Pierce, commanding the dreadnought Vengeance, watched as Zephyrian weapons struck his ship's hull. "Damage report," Nathan called to his engineering officer. "Minor hull scoring on the outer armor, no penetration. Their weapons aren't designed for ships built to our standards." Nathan nodded. Human ships were constructed to survive everything Earth's solar system could throw at them. Solar radiation that would cook most galactic species, asteroid impacts that would cripple normal vessels, and gravitational stresses that would tear apart ships designed for peaceful core worlds. The Zephyrian weapons that should have crippled the Vengeance barely scratched its armor. Return fire, all main batteries. The Vengeance's weapons had been designed to function in the electromagnetic storms of Jupiter's radiation belt and the crushing gravity wells near Earth's sun. When they struck the Zephyrian flagship, the results were devastating. High Admiral Vextha felt his ship shake apart around him as human weapons tore through Zephyrian armor like it was made of paper. His shields, designed for civilized warfare between advanced species, collapsed immediately under the brutal efficiency of human military technology. "Sir, we've lost main power and life support on 12 decks," his damage control officer reported. "The humans are using weapons far beyond what our intelligence predicted." Vextha stared at his tactical display as his fleet died around him. 23 ships destroyed in the first 10 minutes of combat. The remaining 17 were heavily damaged and falling back toward the planet's atmosphere. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "They're supposed to be a primitive species." His tactical officer looked up from his station with terror in his large eyes. "Sir, I think our intelligence was wrong about what primitive means when applied." To Deathworlders. On the planet's surface, Marine Colonel Steve Parker was leading the first wave of human ground forces into combat. The Zephyrians had landed troops near Haven's Rest to secure the colony before the bombardment, but they were discovering that fighting humans on a planetary surface was very different from space combat. Sergeant Ryan Clark crouched behind cover with his squad, watching Zephyrian soldiers move across the open farmland toward the colony. The aliens were wearing heavy environmental suits because Haven's Rest had slightly higher gravity and oxygen levels than their homeworld could handle. "Look at them," Ryan said to his squad. "They can barely move in this gravity." Private Jennifer Walsh peered through her scope at the advancing aliens. "Sarge, they're moving so slow, it's like they're walking underwater." The Zephyrian troops had trained for combat on worlds similar to their own, with low gravity and thin atmospheres. Haven's Rest, which was comfortable for humans, felt like a high-gravity hell world to the alien soldiers. Ryan keyed his radio. "Colonel Parker, this is Bravo Squad. Enemy forces are advancing, but they're having serious mobility problems." Steve Parker's voice came back immediately. "Understood, Sergeant. Take them down." The human Marines opened fire with weapons designed for Earth's diverse and dangerous combat environments. Rifles that could function in Arctic cold desert heat and tropical humidity performed flawlessly in Haven's Rest's mild climate. The Zephyrian soldiers, already struggling with the gravity and atmosphere, found themselves facing opponents who moved like ghosts through terrain. the aliens found almost impossible to navigate. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the medic attached to Ryan's squad, watched through her binoculars as the alien troops tried to take cover behind farm equipment. They don't know how to fight in this environment at all. She was right. The Zephyrian ground forces had been trained for combat on carefully controlled worlds with predictable conditions. Earth had taught humans to fight in jungles, deserts, mountains, and swamps. They adapted to new environments instinctively while the aliens struggled with basic movement. Back in space, the battle was reaching its conclusion. Admiral Rick Carson watched from the bridge of the Determination as the last functional Zephyrian ships tried desperately to escape the system. "Admiral," Captain Lisa Brooks reported, "enemy fleet is down to 8 operational vessels. They're attempting to withdraw." Rick looked at the tactical display showing the scattered wreckage of what had once been a 40-ship invasion fleet. The aliens had threatened to kill human children, and now they were paying the price for that mistake. "Negative on the withdrawal," Rick said coldly. "No ship that participated in the attack on civilian targets leaves this system." Captain Gary Phillips, commanding the destroyer Lightning, moved to intercept the fleeing Zephyrian vessels. His ship had taken the first shot at the school, protecting hundreds of children by using his own vessel as a shield. Now he was going to make sure the aliens never threatened another human colony. Lightning to Admiral Carson, "We have weapons. Lock on the remaining enemy vessels." "Fire at will, Captain." The last Zephyrian ships died under concentrated fire from human destroyers and cruisers. High Admiral Vextha's flagship, heavily damaged and listing, tried to broadcast a surrender signal, but it was too late. Captain Derek Moore, commanding the battleship Thunder, had been listening to reports from the surface about the alien ground attack on civilian areas. His weapons officer looked to him for confirmation. "Sir, the alien flagship is trying to surrender." Derek thought about the children hiding in school shelters while aliens tried to bomb them from orbit. "Negative. Continue firing." The Zephyrian flagship broke apart under the Thunder's guns, taking High Admiral Vextha and his dreams of easy conquest with it. On Haven's Rest, Commander Jake Sullivan emerged from the underground command bunker to find human Marines securing the area around the colony. The Zephyrian ground forces had been defeated so quickly that most colonists hadn't even seen the fighting. Lieutenant Paul Davis met Jake at the entrance to the shelter complex. "Commander, the Marine Colonel wants to speak with you." Steve Parker approached them, his armor still smoking from the brief ground battle. "Commander Sullivan, the planet is secure. Enemy ground forces have been eliminated." Jake looked around at his colony, which had been under attack just hours before. Now human warships filled the sky above them, and human Marines were patrolling the streets to ensure everyone's safety. "Colonel, how many casualties did we take?" Steve Parker's expression was grim. 17 colonists killed in the initial bombardment, mostly at the power station. 43 injured. The school is intact, and all the children are safe. Jake felt relief wash over him. The emergency beacon had worked. Humanity had come to protect its people, just as the system was designed to do. In orbit, Admiral Carson was receiving final battle reports from his fleet commanders. The engagement had lasted less than 2 hours, and the results were absolute. "Total enemy losses, Admiral," Captain Brooks reported. 40 ships destroyed, approximately 8,000 alien military personnel. Our losses are minimal. 3 fighters damaged, no ships lost, no personnel killed. Rick stared at the numbers. An entire alien fleet had been destroyed with almost no human casualties. This wasn't just a military victory. It was a demonstration of what happened when someone threatened human civilians. The aliens had thought they were attacking a helpless farming colony defended by primitive weapons. Instead, they had triggered the largest military response in human history and discovered that humans were far from primitive. They were servile. News of the Haven's Rest battle spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Within 3 days, every major species had heard about the human fleet's response to the Zephyrian attack. The story grew with each telling, but the basic facts remained the same. 40 alien warships had attacked a human farming colony. and over 200 human military vessels had responded by destroying the entire enemy fleet. Ambassador Helen Wright stepped off her transport ship at the Galactic Council chambers on Centauri Prime. She had been Earth's representative to various trade negotiations, but now she was about to become humanity's first official ambassador to the galactic community. The events at Haven's Rest had changed everything. General Andrew Martinez, her military advisor, walked beside her as they approached the massive council building. "Ambassador, we're getting requests for meetings from 17 different species. Everyone wants to know more about human military capabilities." Helen nodded. 3 days ago, most galactic species had barely heard of humanity. Now they were all wondering if these new Deathworlders posed a threat to galactic peace. Dr. Robert Kim, serving as cultural attaché, checked his tablet for the latest reports. "Ma'am, the Altarian Republic has formally requested a defense agreement. The Centauri Consortium wants to discuss expanded trade relationships. Even the Rigel Empire is asking about diplomatic contact." Inside the council chambers, representatives from dozens of species watched as the human delegation took their seats. The Altarians, tall and graceful beings from a peaceful garden world, whispered among themselves. The Centauri, who looked almost human except for their silver skin, studied the newcomers with obvious interest. Council Speaker Zethara, an ancient being from the Vegan Confederation, called the emergency session to order. Her voice echoed through the vast chamber as she addressed the assembled delegates. "We are here to discuss the recent military action in the Haven's Rest system. The human delegation will present their account of events." Helen stood and walked to the center of the chamber. She had prepared for this moment during the 3-day journey from Earth, knowing that humanity's future relationship with the galaxy depended on what she said next. Honored delegates, 3 days ago the human colony of Haven's Rest was attacked without warning by forces of the Zephyrian Dominion. 50,000 civilian colonists, including children, were threatened with death if they did not abandon their legally established settlement. The chamber remained silent as Helen continued. When diplomatic contact failed, and the alien commander threatened to target schools and hospitals, the human defense fleet responded to protect civilian lives. The attacking force was neutralized with minimal casualties to our own people. A delegate from the Rigel Empire, a species known for their own military strength, stood up. "Ambassador Wright, our intelligence reports suggest your fleet numbered over 200 warships. This response seems excessive for a single colony." Helen looked directly at the Rigel representative. "Every human colony, no matter how small or remote, is protected by the full strength of humanity. When someone threatens our civilians, especially our children, we respond with whatever force is necessary to end that threat." Another delegate, this one from the peaceful Andromedan Collective, raised a concern. The scale of destruction was unprecedented. 40 ships destroyed with no survivors. Does humanity consider this proportional response? General Martinez stepped forward. The alien commander was given multiple opportunities to withdraw. He chose instead to target civilian areas, including a school with 300 children inside. At that point, proportional response became irrelevant. Across the galaxy, the aftermath of Haven's Rest was creating similar conversations in government buildings, military academies, and diplomatic missions. Species that had never heard of humans were suddenly very interested in learning about them. On the Zephyrian homeworld, Emergency Chancellor Kethra was dealing with the political crisis created by High Admiral Vextha's failed attack. The loss of 40 warships and 8,000 military personnel had shocked the Zephyrian people, who had never experienced a military defeat of this magnitude. The attack was unauthorized, Kethra announced to the Galactic News Network. High Admiral Vextha exceeded his authority when he attacked the human colony. The Zephyrian Dominion formally apologizes to humanity and offers full reparations for any damage to Haven's Rest. The Zephyrian government was trying to avoid further conflict with a species that had demonstrated overwhelming military superiority. Intelligence reports from the battle made it clear that the human fleet could have easily continued their attack and destroyed Zephyrian military installations throughout their territory. Back on Earth, President Catherine Adams was meeting with Defense Secretary General William Torres to discuss humanity's new position in galactic politics. The Haven's Rest response had accomplished its goal of protecting the colony, but it had also announced humanity's presence on the galactic stage in a very dramatic way. "General, what are our recruitment numbers looking like?" Catherine asked. William checked his reports. "Recruitment stations are overwhelmed, Madam President. Colonel Frank Martinez reports that applications for military service have increased by 400% since Haven's Rest. Everyone wants to be part of the fleet that protects human colonies." On Haven's Rest itself, the rebuilding process was moving quickly. Director Mike Thompson had arrived from Earth to oversee the reconstruction of damaged facilities. The memorial for the 17 colonists killed in the initial attack was being designed by architect Sandra Lee, who wanted to create something that honored their sacrifice while celebrating the community's survival. Commander Jake Sullivan walked through the colony's main street, watching as construction crews worked to repair the damage from the Zephyrian bombardment. Children were playing in the temporary playground set up near the school, their laughter a welcome sound after days of fear and uncertainty. Dr. Lisa Morgan met him outside the medical center, which was being expanded to handle the colony's growing population. Word of Haven's Rest survival had spread throughout human space, and families were requesting to move there as a symbol of human determination. "Commander, we're getting applications from people who want to settle here," Lisa told him. "They're calling Haven's Rest the colony that brought humanity together." Jake smiled as he watched the Henderson family working in their fields, replanting crops that had been damaged in the attack. Kevin Wright was repairing farming equipment with help from Terran engineers who had volunteered to assist with reconstruction. Teacher Amy Johnson was preparing lesson plans for the expanded school that would be built to replace the temporary classrooms. The children who had hidden in shelters during the bombardment were now excited about their new school, which would be the most advanced educational facility in human space. At the Galactic Council, Ambassador Helen Wright was concluding her presentation to the assembled delegates. The response to her speech had been mixed, with some species expressing concern about human military power, while others were clearly interested in forming alliances. "The human position is simple," Helen said. "We seek peaceful relationships with all species. We will trade, explore, and cooperate with anyone who approaches us in good faith. But we will not tolerate attacks on our civilians, and we will respond to any such attacks with overwhelming force." Council Speaker Zathara nodded approvingly. "The Galactic Council recognizes humanity's right to defend its colonies and citizens. The Haven's Rest incident will be recorded as justified defensive action." Dr. Robert Kim made notes as various species approached the human delegation with requests for meetings. The Altarians wanted to discuss mutual defense agreements. The Centauri were interested in expanded trade relationships. Even former enemies of these species were asking about diplomatic contact with humanity. The message was clear. Nobody wanted to be on the wrong side of the species that had destroyed an entire fleet to protect a single colony. 6 months later, Haven's Rest had become the most famous human colony in the galaxy. The school where children had hidden during the bombardment was now a symbol of human resilience. Visitors from across human space came to see the memorial and hear the story of how humanity's first interstellar distress call had triggered the largest military response in human history. Admiral Rick Carson, now serving as overall commander of Human Defense Forces, stood in his office on Titan Station looking at fleet deployment reports. The Haven's Rest incident had changed human military doctrine forever. Never again would a human colony face attack alone. "Admiral," Captain Lisa Brooks reported, "we now have permanent defense fleets stationed in every system with human settlements. The new rapid response protocol means any colony can have military support within 6 hours." Rick nodded with satisfaction. The emergency beacon system had worked exactly as designed, proving that when humans called for help, humanity would respond with everything they had. The galaxy had learned a simple but important lesson at Haven's Rest. Humans were peaceful by choice, not weakness. They preferred diplomacy and cooperation. But when forced to fight, they fought with the determination of a species that had survived on one of the most dangerous planets in the galaxy. Most importantly, the galaxy had learned that human civilians were under the pro. The human position is simple, Helen said. We seek peaceful relationships with all species. We will trade, explore, and cooperate with anyone who approaches us in good faith. But we will not tolerate attacks on our civilians, and we will respond to any such attacks with overwhelming force. Council Speaker Zathara nodded approvingly. The Galactic Council recognizes humanity's right to defend its colonies and citizens. The Haven's Rest incident will be recorded as justified defensive action. Dr. Robert Kim made notes as various species approached the human delegation with requests for meetings. The Altarians wanted to discuss mutual defense agreements. The Centauri were interested in expanded trade relationships. Even former enemies of these species were asking about diplomatic contact with humanity. The message was clear. Nobody wanted to be on the wrong side of the species that had destroyed an entire fleet to protect a single colony. 6 months later, Haven's Rest had become the most famous human colony in the galaxy. The school where children had hidden during the bombardment was now a symbol of human resilience. Visitors from across human space came to see the memorial and hear the story of how humanity's first interstellar distress call had triggered the largest military response in human history. Admiral Rick Carson, now serving as overall commander of Human Defense Forces, stood in his office on Titan Station looking at fleet deployment reports. The Haven's Rest incident had changed human military doctrine forever. Never again would a human colony face attack alone. Admiral, Captain Lisa Brooks reported, we now have permanent defense fleets stationed in every system with human settlements. The new rapid response protocol means any colony can have military support within 6 hours. Rick nodded with satisfaction. The emergency beacon system had worked exactly as designed, proving that when humans called for help, humanity would respond with everything they had. The galaxy had learned a simple but important lesson at Haven's Rest. Humans were peaceful by choice, not weakness. They preferred diplomacy and cooperation. But when forced to fight, they fought with the determination of a species that had survived on one of the most dangerous planets in the galaxy. Most importantly, the galaxy had learned that human civilians were under the pro.